started here. Good morning. I'm Jim Davis. It's my privilege to represent our community in the United States Congress, and I hope you'll pardon the change in schedule. Part of my job, obviously, is to be our voice in the United States Congress. Another part of my job is to try to bring Washington down to our community when we can. The China issue is a wonderful example, I think, of something that's terribly good for our community and for our state and as well for our country. And I'm very pleased and honored that the President of the United States took time from his very busy schedule today to drop by and talk with us briefly about the China issue. Before I introduce him, I also want to single out a couple people in the audience who are not going to be able to stay. One is our former governor, Buddy McKay, who's now serving as the envoy to the Americas with President Clinton. Also, our insurance commissioner, Bill Nelson, who's with the President as well. If we have more time, I think it would be a good use of time for me to recite the accomplishments of the Clinton-Gore administration, particularly as regards to the economy. The statistics are stunning, and I think would have been characterized as unbelievable 10 years ago. But I don't have time to do that. I'm going to talk very specifically about the trade so y'all can listen to the President, and then I will speak afterwards. There has been a record number of trade agreements consummated in this administration, and I won't go through the litany, but I think it's very fair to say that it's because of President Clinton that has occurred. It is really remarkable how many opportunities will exist for our children and grandchildren to enjoy the benefits of both exports and imports around the world because of all the trade agreements that the United States Trade Representative Charlene Barshevsky has negotiated. Perhaps none is more significant than the China bilateral agreement, which is scheduled to be approved by the United States Senate and hopefully the Congress in this September, thanks to the President pushing very, very hard to get that done. Even the most cynical and staunchest opponents of this agreement have to concede that it is truly a very, very successful agreement for the United States. Mr. President, I had a chance to meet the President Ranji earlier this year, and I would not want to play poker with him. He is a very shrewd negotiator. And I think to the credit of this President, the agreement was up for close to approval back in September or October of last year, and the President made a calculated judgment to walk away from the agreement and go back to the bargaining table amid much criticism, and succeeded in coming back with a much stronger agreement and a very strong hand to play in the United States Congress, where he achieved a very significant vote in the House of Representatives. And I will just single out to you one area that is very important to our community and our economy that the President single-handedly helped achieve, and that's in phosphate and fertilizer. He and Charlene Barshevsky are responsible for some very important market access concessions the Chinese made that will have remarkable benefits to our community, particularly the Port of Tampa. It's my honor, my pleasure to introduce to you the President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say that I'm delighted to be back in Florida. I'm glad to be here with Jim Davis and my longtime friends Bill Nelson and Buddy McKay, who is doing a wonderful job for the United States as our special envoy to the Americas. And he did spearhead the passage of the Congress earlier this year of the Caribbean Basin Trade Initiative, which is one of the most important things Congress has done this year. It's something I know that will be of special benefit to Florida. I want to just say a few words about this China issue. First of all, it is part of an overall strategy we have followed for almost 8 years now. When I became president, it was obvious to me that to turn the economy around, we had to do three things. We had to get rid of the deficit and get interest rates down and get investments up. We had to invest in the new technologies of the future and in the educational capacity of our people, and to create a whole network of lifetime learning in America. And we had to expand trade. Whether we like it or not, the economy of every country will become increasingly global, and we have to be in a position to take advantage of it. A lot of people who don't agree with my position say that, well, we still got a big trade deficit. That's true. The reason we do is because our economy has grown so much more rapidly than that of our major trading partners. 5-year economic slowdown in Japan has contributed to our trade deficit. The collapse of the other Asian economies for a couple of years and the problems that Russia had all contributed to our trade deficit. But if you look to the long-term future, America has got, if we want to make things, we've got to sell them to somebody. We have 4% of the world's population and 22% of the world's income. So it's not rocket science to figure out that if you're going to produce this much wealth, you've got to sell it to somebody. And so I believe that we have now about 300 trade agreements we've negotiated over 8 years under the leadership of Charlene Barshevsky and before her, Mickey Cannon. I think they've done a great job. And as I said, Buddy McKay's done a great job. We've enjoyed strong support in a bipartisan fashion from the Florida legislative delegation, and Senator Graham in particular has been very helpful, and I'm grateful for that. But this China issue is something special because it involves huge economics, but it goes beyond economics. And I'd just like to mention and make 1 or 2 points here. The agreement basically is not like other trade agreements. And all the other trade agreements, they really are trades. You get together and you swap out. You give them something, they give you something, and you work out the best deal you possibly can. And not everybody's happy, but you do it because you think there'll be more good than harm. This is really a membership agreement, and it's important that it be understood as that. That is, in order for China to get into the WTO, the members of the World Trading Organization have to agree that China will get in on reasonable commercial terms. So in order to do that, they have to start with the world's largest economy, the United States, and we work out what the reasonable terms will be. Since we have a very large trade deficit with China, which is typical for a country that's developing like that, their markets are more closed to us than our markets are to them. This agreement essentially involves opening China's markets for trade and for investment to an extent that would have been unimaginable even a year and a half ago. Phosphate fertilizer will be affected, citrus will be affected, automobiles and automobile parts and dealerships will be affected. It's all, in that sense, a one-way street in our favor. Now, China will also be able to sell more things to us as it grows more economically diverse and more powerful. So it's a good deal for them because they have to modernize their economy. Beyond that, I have to tell you that for me, while keeping this prosperity going is very important, and in some ways, the great underlying issue that the American people will have to decide in this election year. And I think a big part of it is paying off the debt, for example. We can be out of debt in 12 years. And if we do it, interest rates over the next decade will be at least a point lower than they otherwise would be. And that's lower business loans, $250 billion in lower home mortgage payments, $30 billion in car payments, $15 billion in college loan payments. I think that's very important. But this trade issue must be at the heart of that. Beyond that, as important as all the economics is, you should understand also that this is a big national security issue for the United States. In the last 50, 60 years, we fought 3 wars in Asia. A lot of blood was shed in World War II, in Korea, and Vietnam. Now we look to the future, and we don't know what the next 50 years will hold. And no one can guarantee the future. But we know this, that if we're trading with people and working with them, there's a lot better chance that we'll find peaceful ways to work out whatever differences we have. And the more China is involved in the global economy and the global society, the more likely it is to change, to become more democratic, to become more open, to become more transparent, and to become a better partner instead of a competitor with us in the Pacific region and a better neighbor to all the other countries in that area. So I really believe that there are lives at stake here. I believe there are futures at stake. And I believe if you look at the 2 largest countries in the world in population, China and India, the Indian subcontinent together actually has about the same population as China. And if we could effect a peaceful transition in both those places that had greater trade at its core and greater communications back and forth, the world would be a very different place in the next 50 years, and a much better place for all of our children. So I want to tell you all that while I know that your interest properly is in the benefits that will flow directly to your activities in this state and this region, the truth is it's bigger than all that. And it's about what kind of future our kids and our grandkids are going to have. I just want to make one last point, a very practical one. We had Jim Davis was appropriately modest, but the truth is we had to fight like the devil to get that thing through the House. And we carried it. We had a pretty good vote, as it turned out, but it was a very, very hard fight. And it was a harder fight for members of our party. And he showed great courage and great leadership, and you should be very grateful to him because he really stuck it out there. He was an early, strong, unambiguous supporter saying to do this, and it's the right thing for our country. And I'm really proud of him for doing it. Here's the practical issue. We got this bill through the House in a timely fashion. I had very much hoped that we would pass it through the Senate, where it's an easier bill to pass. We got way more votes than we need to pass it. But we couldn't get it through all the procedural and substantive business of the Senate before the 4th of July and then before the August recess. That means that we have to pass it early in September, as soon as they come back, after both parties have their conventions and the August recess is over. We had a very encouraging vote on a procedure that got over 80 votes, and the Senate basically to take it up early. But it is absolutely imperative that this bill be voted in early September. The longer they take to vote, the more likely it could be caught up in procedural wrangles in the Senate. The people who are against the bill, and there are people in both parties that are against the bill, interestingly enough, and they tend to be, ironically, the most conservative members of the Republican caucus and the most liberal members of the Democratic caucus. But the Senate is set up. The Senate is set up and was set up by the founders to slow things down. And one member can cause a world of trouble if there's a whole lot of other things going on at the same time. So this is not a done deal. We have 60 people who publicly declared. I think there are probably 70 senators for this. And I know that it may be hard for you to imagine that if that's the case, that we could have some trouble bringing this up in early September. But in fact, it is true. And I'm very grateful to Senator Lott, the Republican leader in the Senate, majority leader, for his commitment to bring this up in early September. This is really an American issue. This should not be a partisan issue. It's a very important economic and national security issue. But one of the things that I hope will come out of this meeting is that either as an organization or individually, you will make it clear both to your senators, to Senator Mack and Senator Graham, but also insofar as you can to the Senate hierarchy that it is imperative that this be brought up early. The Senate, the Democratic leader, Senator Daschle, is also strongly in support of what we're doing. But the only worry I have now is that with all the business they still have to do, with all the budgetary issues, and the controversy that inevitably attends the closing weeks of the congressional session and the election year, something procedural could happen that would delay this, and then you just don't know what's going to happen. And I can tell you that it is profoundly important to our country. So anything you can do to make your voices heard as ordinary Americans in behalf of voting this quickly in September, that's the key. If they voted early in September, it will pass due, and we'll have a better future.